No one needs to tell you about the increasing demand for available, safe, and nutritious food. You also don't need a reminder that the choices we make today influence the generation of tomorrow. Our food supply must be driven by sustainable practices at every link in the value chain. In addition, we're all becoming more aware of pathogens that threaten the food supply. At this summit, we're gathered to catalyze and celebrate innovations in agriculture. Some of those come from scientific laboratories, some from the cab of a tractor, some from the policies enacted around a boardroom. At Colorado State University, we're seeing innovation in all those realms, where a deeper understanding of biology intersects with accelerated technology. Our scientists draw insight from the data and analytics that help us predict scenarios for agriculture to thrive. Sustainable agriculture is indeed a grand global challenge, and our land grant tradition at CSU places us among the leaders in facing this challenge. Together, we can seek new solutions that assure the safety, security, and sustainability of our food and resource systems to enhance the well-being of humans, plants, and animals. We hope your experiences here will lead to inspiration, conversation, and further innovation as you return to your respective fields. It will take all of us working the oars together to address and excel at what lies ahead. Safe, secure, sustainable. Welcome to the 2018 Ag Innovation Summit.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Executive Associate Dean of the College of Agricultural Sciences, Dr. James Pritchett.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 2018 Ag Innovation Summit here at Colorado State University. Such a pleasure to have you in attendance to talk about some of the most important pressing issues that we have in agriculture and how we're using innovation in order to be able to solve some of those challenges. It's all about a safe food supply, a secure food supply, and a sustainable food supply. I want to take just a moment thinking about that video that you just saw and thank Ron Bend, who shot that video for us. Ron's back in that part of the room. Thank you, Ron, for putting together a great narration. You know, you get to sit in a room with Ron and Paula Mills. Let me thank Paula Mills for just a second, who's been organizing this for us all and directing traffic. Would you join me in thanking Paula? You know, we get a chance to sit around and talk about what this event's going to be like, well, really the day after the event is held the year before. And we start to think about what it means to be part of a land-grant institution here at Colorado State University. And one of the most important things we do, and I think you picked that up in the video this morning, is that we convene conversations, bring together people with great ideas, who understand what our opportunities are, what our pressing challenges are, and who really want to lean in and make a difference and understand what the future will be. It's all about capitalizing and driving change when it comes to the industry of agriculture, and innovation creates the opportunity for us to do that. So thank you for joining us. I want to take just a few moments and recognize some of the guests that are here. I'll spend a little time on housekeeping too, because I'm the official housekeeper of the College of Agricultural Sciences, and then introduce you to some of the topics that we have for us today. So, hey, got some great honored guests with us today. That includes our honorary event chair, Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, who's with us. Thank you, Secretary Vilsack. Last night, if you were at the reception, I told you about a very interesting experience for one of our leaders here at Colorado State University. That might be a trivia question later today, but that's Provost Rick Miranda, who's here with us today. The Deputy Commissioner of Agriculture, Jen Yezak, is with us here for the Colorado Department of Agriculture. Our representative from House District 3 and the chairperson of the House Committee on Agriculture and the Natural Environment, that's Jenny Arndt, is with us here today. We have with us also representatives from Senator Bennett's office. James Thompson's here. Senator Gardner's office, that's Darlene Carpio. Darlene's here. And from Congressman Ken Buck's office, that's Dusty Johnson, here from Fort Morgan, Colorado. Great opportunity to convene us, great opportunity for us to get together, and to be honest, we could not do it without some of our great sponsors. Part of the leadership in this state around agriculture really comes from our commodity organizations. I'd like to take a moment to really recognize those folks for their sponsorship of this event. And if you look out, just outside our west windows to those tents that are going out there, some of these same groups are sponsors for our Ag Day barbecue that'll take place tomorrow morning. This includes the Colorado Livestock Association. It's one of our premier sponsors. Colorado Corn, the Colorado Wheat Administrative Committee, the Colorado Potato Administrative Committee, the Colorado Department of Agriculture, and Rocky Mountain Farmers Union. Thank you for your support and your advocacy for agriculture. Of course, I'm pleased to work with a group of leaders who help sponsor us here at CSU as well. Here at Colorado State University, the Vice President for Research's Office, Alan Rudolph, is here. Help support us, as well as our Division of External Relations, our Colorado Office of Engagement, and also the College of Agricultural Sciences, of which I'm a proud part. So a little bit of housekeeping today. I mentioned the land-grant university before, and I happened to speak to folks last evening about one of the really great investments that we make around our students. So we've got a group of student volunteers that'll help us out today, and in fact, they're going to be our master of ceremonies and help lead us through several events. So you'll see our students come up. I hope you take the chance to get to know them a little bit, know about their aspirations, and how they're preparing to become the leaders of our future. Looking forward to having those students there. They're going to handle a little bit of our question and answer session too. So if you would look on your tables right now, around that pumpkin orange and alfalfa green bandanas that you see there, those are the traditional colors of agriculture for Colorado State University. There's a set of note cards there. As we do question and answer sessions today, you have a pressing question, an idea, something that you'd like to share with the audience, take a moment, jot that down, and hold that up in the air, and our student volunteers will pick those up and we'll make sure that we get your questions to you during that time. You can also, Jan Leach, I actually have to read this part because I'm not in tune with this part. Well, we're also going to be tweeting, right, today, and if you want to tweet, you can use the hashtag CSU Ag Innovation. If you could go ahead and do that, we'll do that. And I think we've got a social media slide that'll help us. Also, we'll be doing some work on Facebook at that time as well. My kids are trying to teach me about social media. There's something called Snapfish or something like that they're on too. But we really want to be able to share our ideas across multiple platforms and engage with folks directly in this conversation. So we look forward to doing that. Along those lines, speaking of engagement, I want to encourage you to continue this tweeting that takes place. We're going to actually watch and see who sends that out. And as you tweet about the summit, the person who does, well, really the best tweets, the most interesting tweets, the greatest quantity of tweets, you'll win, if you use that hashtag, a pair of tickets to our Ag Day barbecue that takes place right on this west lawn tomorrow. We're going to start serving about 10 o'clock for that Ag Day barbecue, right up to game time. We'll have 2 pairs that we'll give away as part of that. So stay tuned and keep tweeting with us. So sessions are about to start. A couple of other housekeeping things. Please do feel free to get beverages, get up as you need to. We'll take some long breaks, allow for the networking that needs to take place in an event like this. If you're interested in using the restrooms, if you go outside these back doors, turn toward the east, which would be toward your right as you go out. There are restrooms both up and down those hallways. We can take breaks as we need to. One last note, so you're aware, we're live streaming this event on our website. So if you have some folks you'd like to see a session, would like to see them share some ideas, you'll be able to do that on our website, that Ag Innovation website that we have. Well, this Ag Innovation Summit is part of really an important week for us here in the College of Ag Sciences. And if you look out towards that window, towards the foothills, you see that big letter A there that sits up there. Historically, going back to some time, we've had students who've gone up and painted that A and thought about what it is to be part of agriculture, part of the heritage of this land-grant university. One thing that we've done over the last 3 years is really think about how we can bring that A back to the campus, be able to elevate it as part of what we do and make it part of the daily conversation of our students and of our community and of our scientists. So with that in mind, we built out this Ag Week. And part of the Ag Week that's taken place is we had a big picnic and we had a big Ag festival on the plaza. We taught folks about agriculture. And we also took the moment, and some of you were here for that at 12:30 yesterday afternoon, to talk about the values that are inherent in agriculture. And some of those values included being inclusive and integrity, Some of those values also included kindness and responsibility. And I think that idea, that notion of values and what's important to us draws us all together. We respect all of our differences and also have a common goal about how to project agriculture forward. There's really one individual who's been behind this kind of renaissance that's brought the A from the foothills back to our campus. Somebody with a great deal of vision, who has put together great teams, and has really been our inspiration as we've done this important work. It's my pleasure to introduce that man, Dean Ajay Menon, for his opening remarks.
Well, that's a setup. That means I'm supposed to say something intelligent. Good morning. It's a pleasure every year that I come to this event to see this convening of the industry, government, and civil society coming together to celebrate that is such a quintessential American tradition called agriculture. Right? Very much, right? And in an appropriate week, too, when at the end of the week, we'll have a massive barbecue. We have a small tailgate, as I like to call it, and our tailgate entails about 3,500 people, right, and on Saturday morning. And then we go into our Canvas Stadium on campus, and we'll see what the outcome of that game is. We don't care about outcomes of the football games too many times because we have a good time leading into it, at least, right? It's my privilege. It's my privilege to serve as the Dean of the College of Agricultural Sciences. I'm entering my 4th year, and to see Ag Innovation Summit convened for the 3rd time is a privilege, it's a joy for me. Why is this event important to us, and why is it important that we have each and every one of you engaged in the life of Colorado State University? We have a very simple vision. Our vision is unquestioned global preeminence. That's what we care about. That's what we've been on a journey to, and that's what inspires us. Unquestioned global preeminence in agritech and agrobiome. Agrobiome would be the microbials. Jan Leach, our Associate Dean for Research, has been coaching me for the last 3 years to at least say it right as a verb, as a noun, as an adjective, in every which way. But how are the microbes in the soil, the plant, the animal, the human important to us? I'm also interested in technology and how is technology driving agriculture. Towards what end? Towards the safety, the security, and the sustainability of our food system. That's all we care about. That's all we want to do within the College of Ag Sciences. Clearly, we can't do this just by a collection of faculty, researchers, staff, and students. We need you, and you have come forward to help us as well. This summit would not be possible if we could not convene interesting people, intelligent people, so that they can be connected, and we make a commitment to make our food system secure. That's what our focus is. Given our focus on security, this year we decided to dive in and focus very much into the bioag security sorts of issues. So today's speakers that you will see, and today the topic that you will see at this summit, you'll see a real focus on how do we make our food system secure. Secure not just from the diseases that are uncontrolled, but there are also events that are intentional, that some external character might want to disrupt our food system. This is a serious issue for this country and for the globe. And we think shining the light on such a topic would be essential for us to then drive research, drive training, and basically make certain that you have students, you have a workforce that is capable of addressing these issues. It's an important issue. We take our job of training students very seriously. And today you'll see us showcase our students. And we do that because they are just a slice of the incredible students who come to Colorado State University and to our ag school. I say business school every once in a while because I spent 24 years in that college. But I can tell you I've found my real passion the last 4 years. Now that's called recovery from having made a mistake here. Yeah. But I say this for a reason. 67% of the student body at Colorado, in the ag school at Colorado State University are women. 63% of our student body in the ag school are from non-farm backgrounds. Nearly 30% are first in their families to go to college. Okay? But we are proud that 91% of them find placement right after graduation. Okay? They come from all different counties here in the state of Colorado, and we would love to see them get back to revive the rural economies of the state. And so today, you will see many of them, and they just showcase the very best that CSU has to offer. So the first person I'd like to introduce you to is a young lady, grew up in Texas, outside of Austin, studies animal science and biomedical sciences, has a dear interest in being an academic because she was inspired by the incredible faculty we have here, right? Jordan Marsh is here to introduce our keynote speaker today. So Jordan, would you come up, please?
Hi, my name is Jordan Marsh. I'm a third-year undergraduate animal science major, and I also serve as a co-chair for Ag Ambassadors within the College of Agricultural Sciences. Some of my passions within the college include student recruitment endeavors and undergraduate research with the genetics and meat safety and quality teams. I look forward to applying to veterinary school next fall and continuing my education at Colorado State University within their veterinary program. It is my privilege and honor today to introduce Mr. Kevin Shea. Kevin Shea was appointed Administrator of the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service in June 2013. In this role, Mr. Shea carries out the agency's multiple missions of protecting the health and value of American agriculture, mitigating the impact of human-wildlife conflict to protect agricultural, environmental, and human health and safety, ensuring the safe and timely availability of new genetically engineered technologies, and administering the Animal Welfare and Horse Protections Acts. In addition to his APHIS duties, during 2016, Mr. Shea served as the USDA Agency Transition Director, and for much of 2017, served as the Acting Deputy Undersecretary for Marketing and Regulatory Programs. Before becoming administrator, Mr. Shea served as the associate administrator from 2004 to 2012, the deputy administrator for policy and program development from 2000 to 2004, and director of budgeting and accounting from 1992 to 2000. Mr. Shea is a graduate of the University of Maryland in College Park, Maryland. He earned a law degree summa cum laude from the University of Baltimore School of Law. A native of Washington, D.C., Mr. Shea now resides in Crofton, Maryland. Mr. Shea, welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much, Jordan. I think you noticed that Jordan had a little help to look a little taller here, and she took it away. I could have used that, but I'll do the best I can. It's a great honor to be here today and to be invited to speak with you. We in APHIS have a very special tie with Colorado State. We have probably hundreds of Colorado State University graduates who have worked for APHIS or do now. We have very many who work for us today. As you know, we have a big location here in Fort Collins and also the National Wildlife Research Center in Fort Collins. So we look at Colorado State as one of our prime sources for talent in the future. And I hope Jordan will consider joining us one day when she gets her veterinary degree. I'm sure she will be a great pleasure to have us here. It's a great honor to be a keynote speaker. I feel like a bit of an imposter among this group of esteemed scientists, people with great backgrounds. As Jordan indicated, I'm just a budget analyst with a law degree. But I know a lot of scientists and know where to call on them for help. And I have a few of them with me here today. First, I want to introduce Dr. Sarah Tomlinson. Sarah is a senior executive in our Veterinary Services Science and Technology group. More importantly right now, she is heading our Animal Disease Traceability Program. This is an innovation we've been trying to put in place for nearly 20 years so that we can identify animals, trace them back to where they came from when there's a disease outbreak. And like much innovation, we've actually faced a lot of opposition and skepticism about it. And so Sarah has graciously taken on what's been a thankless task for these 20 years to try to push this finally over the finish line. But that innovation of being able to identify animals, where they came from, especially during a disease outbreak, is just crucial to the future for us in APHIS. And we think it'll be crucial to the industry because their buyers are increasingly demanding that kind of ability. Also with me today is Dr. Larry Clark. Dr. Larry Clark runs the National Wildlife Research Center and has for, I think, almost 20 years now. Like me, he's a native of the Washington, D.C. area, but he was able to escape and has been here for all that time. Some of you know about our Wildlife Services program. It gets a pretty bum rap. Some people think all we do is go out and shoot wildlife for no reason. And in fact, Larry's research is almost entirely focused on non-lethal predator control, innovation, just like you are all talking about here today. Now, I suppose that it's typical for a federal government speaker to come to an event like this to brag about their agency and defend their agency and what they do, and I'll probably do a little bit of that today. But my real goal here today is to really issue a challenge and an exhortation to all of you, and especially perhaps to the CSU students who are here. We need more and better tools, quite simply. APHIS and USDA are working on that, but we can't do it alone, and we never could. We operate in a world of annual budgets, 2-year congressional terms, 4-year presidential terms. All of those things place a premium on today, often to the exclusion of tomorrow. Hopefully, all of you in the academic world and in the private sector can have a little longer range view and work on the kinds of things that it will take for us to be more innovative in agriculture so that we can help agriculture thrive and meet the world's basic needs. You know, today's summit is about something very fundamental and indeed indispensable to a happy, healthy, and civilized society. Until a society meets its basic needs, feeding its people and clothing its people, it can't unlock its full potential. Even more, it can't even survive. Those of us old enough to have personally observed the waning days of the Cold War can remember watching the evening news and seeing the stories about empty shelves in grocery stores in the Soviet Union. Now, as President Kennedy once said at a darker moment in the Cold War, victory has 1,000 fathers and defeat is an orphan. So many people accredit many different people and reasons for the collapse of the Soviet Union, and as President Reagan called it, the evil empire. But it seems to me that even a people willing to tolerate a lack of freedom for nearly a century were not willing to tolerate a lack of food. And that regime tumbled soon afterward. Now, again, I said I wasn't going to brag about APHIS and report about what we do in APHIS, but I am compelled to talk a little bit about what we do and report about what we do to help secure the food supply and to make it safer and more sustainable. As APHIS, as it's currently named and constituted, has existed for nearly 50 years, but our roots really go back over 150 years to when President Lincoln created the Department of Agriculture. and our very specific regulatory and programmatic role goes back to 1884, the creation of the Bureau of Animal Industry, created then to address livestock diseases like cattle fever and pleuropneumonia. And the first head of the Bureau of Animal Industry, Dr. Daniel Salmon, was an agricultural innovator at his time. He discovered that sterilized cultures of dead bacteria would confer immunity. He discovered that ticks spread cattle fever. And he designed the most basic concept of veterinary regulatory medicine that we continue to adhere to this day. That to control and eradicate the disease, you have to know where it came from, where it is now, where it might have gone, and stop it from going to any other places. And not to get too far ahead of myself, but this most basic tenet of regulatory medicine is challenged today because of modern innovations, both inside and outside of agriculture, that allow animals and all agricultural products and the people and conveyances that carry them to move faster and farther and in greater numbers than ever before. And of course, that means diseases can spread faster and farther than ever before. Secretary Vilsack used to say that USDA touches people every day and in every way. Secretary Perdue now says that USDA's goal is to do right and feed everybody. APHIS's core mission is tied to both of those concepts. We protect the health and value of American agriculture and natural resources. The mission is noble, but we can't carry it out with blinders on. We could protect America agriculture and its health, but we could put farmers and ranchers out of business doing it if we apply too onerous regulation. We could invite individual states to place burdensome regulations on each other if we were to abandon the field. And we could invite foreign trading partners to apply barriers to us if we apply non-science-based barriers on them, whether we do that as a deliberate attempt at protectionism or, probably even more frequently, a simple failure to discover and apply the best possible science. So innovation is a key to us to avoid all of those bad outcomes. And again, I reiterate my challenge and exhortation to all of you to help us find better ways. As our name suggests, our mission focuses on animal and plant health by preventing, controlling, eradicating pests and diseases. We have a lot of other missions in APHIS that also could use innovation. As Jordan mentioned, we administer the Animal Welfare and Horse Protection Acts. More innovation would be helpful there for us. We also regulate biotechnology at its initial stage in certain cases. We could use more innovation there. We could certainly use more help with our emergency response techniques and all of our research. So all these things taken together, we believe create a world-class system designed to safeguard the health of animals, plants, people, and ecosystems throughout the U.S. and help foster agricultural world trade. As agricultural trade and practices have evolved, so has APHIS. We're dealing with larger data sets than ever before. These data, whether related to the climate, genome sequences, or geographic information systems, inform all of our decisions. Here's one piece of data that is particularly interesting and almost really frightening in many ways to us. The United Nations World Tourism Organization estimates that worldwide there were just 25 million tourist arrivals in 1950. By 2016, that number had grown to 1.2 billion international arrivals. That's a 50% increase, an upward trend that we expect to continue. But just as international travel is increasing, so is international trade. Now, the upsides of that are certainly obvious to us. Our world feels more connected than ever before. American agriculture has found markets for its abundant production. Without those markets, many farmers and ranchers couldn't survive. I meet annually with each sector of agriculture to see what they need from us, how we can serve them better. And in virtually every case, the first thing they talk about is helping them get into more markets. Some of our sectors rely on 20 to 30 to 40% of their product being exported. And many countries apply what we believe usually to be inappropriate scientific barriers against our product, and we work hard to break those barriers down. So there are so many great things to trade. And another great thing, of course, is American consumers have access to food all year round that at one time they never would have had. But all of this means that pests and diseases have more opportunities to spread. In terms of an introduced pest, we always thought that the pest introduction could be inadvertent or negligent, people simply not realizing they were bringing a pest in, or even maybe some commercial shippers sending product in, not following proper regulation, but thinking they get by with it, but certainly not intending to bring in pests and diseases. But of course, September 11, 2001 changed that thinking for us. America's enemies might weaponize food and food production. I noticed that someone from the FBI is speaking later, and I'm interested to hear what he has to say. A few strategically distributed vials of foot and mouth disease, which probably wouldn't be that hard to obtain, could cripple our cattle and hog industry in just a few days. Think about that again. There's foot and mouth disease in lots of parts of the world, and enemies of the United States could easily gather some foot and mouth disease virus, put it in a vial, and strategically place it anywhere in the United States. If we had a single FMD case introduced in the US, I think we'd probably find it pretty quickly, and I think we'd be successful in eradicating it pretty quickly. But if there were widely distributed introductions of foot and mouth disease, it's a completely different story. In addition to the world changes in travel patterns and the terrorist threat, we are experiencing weather extremes, as evidenced by stronger hurricanes, more flooding, more extreme heat, all of those sorts of things. In the western United States, I know that the wildfire seasons start earlier and last longer. As climate zones change, we know that agriculture is likely to face new threats. We may find pests and diseases where we never expected to find them before. This would impact our quarantine strategies and where we could allow product to move or not, and perhaps disrupt systems. And again, finding pests and diseases where we don't expect to find them, another thing that we need to think about constantly. Our views on innovation in APHIS focus on 5 basic questions. 1, what assumptions are at the heart of our approach to animal and plant health, and do we need to re-examine them? 2, what internal processes are causing bottlenecks, and how can we remedy those? 3, what technologies are working for us, and where do we need to renew our investment in technology? 4th, where we are using resources wisely, where can they be used more effectively? And finally, what activities are we conducting that, while beneficial, aren't high enough priority to continue, so that we can shift those resources to something else? So perhaps the most critical question we constantly ask ourselves in APHIS is, how do we balance protecting agricultural health with the need to keep commerce moving and farmers and ranchers profitable? When I talk to our stakeholders in the farming and ranching communities, I always make it clear that APHIS isn't here just to help them be healthy. We're here to make them healthy and profitable. If they're not profitable, they can't survive. People won't eat. So we always have to balance what we're doing against the cost of what we're doing. Now, preventing pest and disease introductions would be simple if we just closed our ports and states closed their borders, but we can't do that, and we don't want to do that. There's no value in healthy agriculture if it can't reach the domestic or global marketplace. So we have to find that balance, and we can't do it alone. We look to you in partnership, hand in hand, to find better ways of doing everything we're doing. In terms of combating pests and diseases, our system is based on basic principles, nothing earth-shattering: prevention, preparedness, and response. Before an emergency, we work to ensure that our emergency management plans, procedures, and training are current with international and national standards. And during emergencies, we coordinate actions with federal, state, and local entities to contain, control, or eradicate pests and disease threats. The best way to combat pests and diseases is to prevent them from ever entering our country and becoming established in the first place. Once they get here and get established, you have literally century-long programs. We've been working to eradicate tuberculosis from cattle in the United States since 1917. And yet, in the last few years, we've actually seen more cases than we did a few years before. A century-long program. Boll weevils arrived in this country almost 100 years ago. We're still at what we hope, the very end stages of eradicating boll weevil. And again, even with tuberculosis, we've had great success. But these programs exist because the problem still exists over 100 years after the pest or disease first popped up here. So we have some lines of defense to try to keep pests and diseases out of the country in the first place. The first is offshore in the exporting country, where we assist trading partners with their infrastructure and control efforts to try to stop threats at their source. Second, at U.S. ports of entry, we partner with the Department of Homeland Security to inspect shipments and vessels where we intercept pests and diseases before they enter the country. And then, of course, for those that do get in the country, we have ongoing programs, ongoing activities that range from surveillance to prove the absence of disease, and that's an important point as well. We do a lot of work in APHIS to try to control diseases and to eradicate diseases. Often, the most important thing we can do is prove the absence of a disease so that a foreign country will accept our product. And of course, we have long-range, long-term eradication campaigns. We've eradicated brucellosis from everywhere except the area surrounding Yellowstone National Park. That program started in the mid-1930s. And again, we've eradicated it from everywhere but around Yellowstone National Park. But as long as that reservoir is there, there's always a threat. I mentioned the boll weevil program. We've had a very active program coordinated with the states and the industry now for almost 40 years and eradicated boll weevil all the way from North Carolina to just a small part of Texas. An amazing effort and a combination effort. The growers themselves, the cotton growers paid for 70% of that program. Great program. And the problem is there's still some boll weevil problem existing in northern Mexico. And until we can get rid of that, we'll always have some problem. But tremendous efforts there. Let me talk a little bit about capacity building in other countries. Through technology and transfer and training, APHIS is helping some foreign partners build up their infrastructure for detecting and responding to agricultural threats. We also bring international experts and officials here to work with them, and I think many of them actually have come to Fort Collins on many occasions. We've been working very closely with our partners in the Western Hemisphere, Southeast Asia, and Africa to improve their avian influenza surveillance efforts, to strengthen their diagnostic capabilities, and improve biosecurity in poultry markets, and especially at small farms and live bird markets where the disease often first gets its foothold. We're free of many of the pests and diseases that plague most of the world. That's mostly the result of innovation and hard work by American farmers and ranchers and those who work with them. Part of it's a little bit luck too, though. And as long as many of these diseases and pests exist throughout the world, we know we can't keep them all out forever. It's better to wipe them out at the source and to help those who lack the technology and know-how to do so. Now, I know some people might say, why should we give up the competitive advantage? U.S. agriculture is certainly healthier and more free of pests and diseases than most countries. Why should we give up that advantage? And I offer two thoughts to that. One is that experience and the best predictive science and analysis we have said that some of those pests and diseases will get here. We can't think they won't. But two, by 2050, The global population is expected to increase to more than 9 billion people. Along with rising incomes, that will translate into historic global growth in food demand. So the choice isn't whether American agriculture will prosper or not, is whether there will be a worldwide famine or not. With 9 billion people to feed, we'll still need every ounce of American agriculture production just to stay even with the demand of 9 billion people. We can feed the world and still make America profitable. Just as the U.S. helped stop famine and prospered in the 1950s with the Marshall Plan, innovation in agriculture shared with the world can do the same in 2050. While capacity building can help, we know that the threats will always exist, so we partner with the other countries to mitigate the pest pathways. One example is our work with Panama to maintain a biological barrier against screwworm. Today, we operate the only sterile screwworm production facility in the world and release sterile screwworms to maintain a biological barrier in southern Panama and northern Colombia. Now, I know that no of the students from Colorado State have ever seen a screwworm, but 50 years ago, screwworm was a terrible problem in the Southwest and the Southeast and cost cattle producers millions and millions of dollars every year. And the only way we can ensure that doesn't happen again is to keep the screwworm as far away as possible. We've pushed it all the way to Panama, and we can keep it there by continuing to drop sterile flies. We also operate sterile Mediterranean fruit fly and Mexican fruit fly facilities. We haven't had quite the same success there, but we have been able to push fruit flies to Guatemala and have a barrier set up there by dropping sterile flies. The screwworm and fruit fly programs have combined to save American agriculture countless billions of dollars. And they are a result of perhaps the single most important innovation in pest programs ever, certainly of the 20th century. In the mid-1950s, 2 Agriculture Research Service scientists, Drs. Knipling and Bushland, invented the sterile insect technique. And I hope that in 2050, my successor or someone like me can stand up here and talk about someone in this room, one of the Colorado State students, or one of the other folks in this room, making the greatest breakthrough of the 21st century. Of course, despite all of our best efforts, it's impossible to stop every pest or disease from foreign countries ever approaching our shores. And so we have to have import regulations based on the best science we have, designed to protect American agriculture while not unduly burdening commerce and slowing the speed of commerce. While the regulations themselves are important, we recognize they only work when people follow them. Sometimes travelers or others don't know the items they are moving are inadmissible or dangerous. I'll give you an example. The giant African snail. In 1966, a boy in Miami, Florida, smuggled 3 African snails into South Florida when he returned from a trip to Hawaii. His grandmother eventually released them into her garden. 7 years later, more than 18,000 snails had been found, along with scores of eggs. The Florida Eradication Program took 10 years and $8 million in today's money. And that, of course, wasn't enough of a lesson, because in 2011, the giant African snail popped up again in Florida. This time, it probably arrived in the mail, delivered by UPS or FedEx, and ordered over the internet. So innovation works both ways for us in APHIS. The innovation of the internet and the wonderful delivery systems of UPS and FedEx delivered a giant African snail to somebody, and then eventually led to another problem. So foreign species can establish themselves with incredible speed, especially in the absence of natural predators. We work with our friends in Customs and Border Protection to enforce APHIS regulations. We actually train those folks to do those inspections, and clearly there's room for innovation there. 30 years ago, we came up with an innovation of sorts, a non-mechanical one, a non-technical one, if you will. we were able to figure out that you could train dogs to sniff out garbage, sniff out sausages, fruits, all kinds of materials. So when you go to an airport now and arrive from overseas and you see those beagles, that was an innovation of its time. And these beagles are very effective, very efficient, and frankly, much easier to manage than some of their human counterparts. They haven't organized into a union yet. But of course, the beagles have their limitations. They're great for sniffing out things in passengers' baggage and in mail packages. Not so much for large container ships, where most product now arrives from overseas. So we need more techniques in import inspection. I've been focusing on foreign pest and disease threats, but we do a lot on the problems we have here now. We do things like release sterile insects proactively. We release sterile medflies in Southern California and also in Florida, knowing that the importing pressure is always there. And that's prevented having large outbreaks of fruit flies, which in the 80s and 90s we met all the time. So we're always looking for new ways to protect our food supply and looking to new technology. And one thing that's, I believe, come out of here at Fort Collins from Dr. Clark's work is our work with unmanned aircraft systems in our feral swine program. Feral swine are causing a lot of problems in this country. The problem of damage is severe. It's costly, pervasive, and growing. There are feral swine now in at least 35 states. There were actually in a few more, but I'm very proud to report we have been able to remove them from a few states. But their population is estimated to be at least 6 million and expanding. They cause an estimated $1.5 billion in damage. $800 million of that is direct damage to farms. They can go in a freshly planted row of corn and take out the entire farm overnight. They're very effective and efficient creatures. They're tearing up people's backyards, and they're carrying lots of diseases. For example, they carry pseudorabies. We spent hundreds of millions of dollars to eradicate pseudorabies from commercial hog production in the United States. But these feral swine have pseudorabies and are a constant reservoir of a threat. But all these things the Congress of the United States was willing to put up with. They were not willing to put up with the fact that feral swine began tearing up golf courses. And this outrage had to be addressed. They had to do something on the 4 days they weren't in session in Washington. And so they have provided significant funding for APHIS to coordinate a national program with feral swine. So we're applying some of the innovations that we're already aware of to this program. For example, we are recording thermal videos using unmanned aircraft to count and plot their movement. Unmanned aircraft can also help quickly discover and quantify the damage they are doing and help us to determine whether or not we're being successful. Another innovative tool we're exploring is eDNA, DNA connected from environmental samples like soil or pooled water. While this technology has largely been used to track aquatic organisms, we can also use it to locate hard-to-track terrestrial species such as feral swine. And we've been collaborating with our partners here at Colorado State and the Forest Service to do just that. And all of these efforts have helped us in our wildlife damage management activities. But most of the tools I've mentioned are helping us to find feral swine, to say where they are and what they've done once they've been there. When we do find them, our tools are tried and true, but they're old and not sufficient. We essentially shoot or trap them. We've made innovations with trapping cages and techniques, but other innovations in population control are absolutely essential. With what we have now, we can reduce the impact of feral swine, but we can't just trap or shoot our way out of the problem. So I challenge you yet again to consider work in this field, research in this field. How can we control populations of feral swine? The other side of the prevention coin is preparedness. We know that prevention won't always work, so we need to be prepared for pest and disease outbreaks. With an extensive extensive network of laboratories, both state, local, and federal laboratories, we draw from among the most advanced and specialized scientific resources available. Let me just mention our facilities. One is the Center for Plant Health, Science, and Technology in Raleigh, North Carolina, where scientists evaluate risk associated with the introduction of plant pests and develop methods to exclude, detect, and manage invasive plant pests and weeds. The Centers for Epidemiology and Animal Health here in Fort Collins, where multidisciplinary specialists track emerging animal health threats, monitor U.S. livestock management and production, design comprehensive animal health surveillance programs, and conduct risk assessments to identify situations that require action. The National Wildlife Research Center, also here in Fort Collins, is the world's only research center devoted entirely to the development of methods for the efficient and effective management of wildlife damage. The National Veterinary Services Laboratories combine to be the nation's premier animal health diagnostic facility in Ames, Iowa. They are the World Animal Health Organization reference laboratories for animal diseases of importance. The Foreign Animal Disease Diagnostic Laboratory is currently on Plum Island, New York, but in a few years will be part of the National Bio and Agro Defense Facility in Manhattan, Kansas. It's a high-security biocontainment facility where experts diagnose and develop tests for foreign animal diseases that threaten us, like foot and mouth disease. The National Animal Health Laboratory Network is an extensive and integrated system of federal, state, and university labs. And finally, the Center for Veterinary Biologics, also in Ames, Iowa, is the nation's sole laboratory involved in the testing and regulation of commercial veterinary biologics. Through all of these facilities, we try to stay on the cutting edge. As you undoubtedly noted, all of these facilities are located near, in some cases actually located on, campuses of land-grant universities. So we have a very special relationship with all land-grant universities, and that's where we look for most of our scientists, most of our veterinarians, all the people in APHIS. This is where we can find our talent. So we have 50 years of experience in APHIS. We draw on lots of others, but we're certainly not immune to typical government problems. We're not immune to the "that's the way we've always done it" philosophy, and we're also not immune to the "but the regulations require us to" syndrome. So we are always challenging ourselves and invite you to continue to challenge us. I want to talk a little bit about biotechnology. So I mentioned earlier, by 2050, the global population is expected to increase to more than 9 billion people. Secretary Vilsack was the first high-ranking U.S. official to relentlessly make that point and raise awareness in the United States and around the world. To feed so many people, we need to increase crop yields, improve crop quality, enhance nutritional value, and continue to ensure food safety. As part of this effort, APHIS is developing a new approach to ensure that we're prepared for innovation in the realm of agricultural biotechnology products. One facet of our mission is the initial regulation of such products. We want a program that doesn't stifle innovation while still using the best available science to protect plant health. We want to serve our stakeholders to the best of our ability and leave the world a legacy of innovative technology. New precision breeding techniques, such as CRISPR and Talon, allow scientists to introduce new plant traits more rapidly and more precisely. These innovations offer tremendous opportunities to improve nutritional quality, create new plant varieties, and contribute to a safer, more secure, and more sustainable food supply, and by all indications, without posing any unique or undue plant pest risk. That's why in March, Secretary Perdue announced that we do not intend to regulate plants that otherwise could have been developed through traditional breeding techniques. As long as these plants haven't been developed by using a plant pest or vector and are not plant pests themselves, we will not regulate them. We hope that this will allow researchers and technology developers, farmers, and trading partners to be more confident about the future in making their plans. I want to make a comment here that may seem a little off point from a summit devoted to science and technology. When we think of innovation, we think about science and technology, and rightfully so. But my view is that we need another kind of innovation around biotechnology. While the history of the biological science of biotechnology has been one of constant innovation and improvement, the history of the marketing, communications, and political science has been far less successful. Somehow, an innovation that promises to lead the way to ensuring that those 9 billion people in 2050 have enough to eat somehow has been portrayed as a boogeyman. Millions of Americans and others around the world are anything from skeptics to downright bitter critics. We need innovation in communications and marketing techniques to keep up with scientific innovation. What a tragedy it would be. What a tragedy it would be if urban myths and social media misinformation stop farmers around the world from having the best science has to offer to all people in the world and feed the whole world. On the animal side, new genome editing and modification technologies have renewed the industry's interest in animal biotech. We can now envision a future that includes biotech animals. What may have once seemed like something from a science fiction movie is now moving into the realm of the possible or even probable. The science is promising. For example, some of these technologies may be able to protect animals from the risk of destructive diseases and provide better animal welfare and safety through traits such as polled cattle and alternatives to surgical castration in pigs. These same technologies may also offer a novel approach to controlling organisms that are the source of debilitating animal diseases and vectors of potential pandemics such as ticks, mosquitoes, and flies. So again, new techniques that may allow us to stop pests and diseases without some of the burdensome techniques like regulation and quarantine and massive depopulation that we have to use now. So APHIS and its partners will certainly carefully assess what the risks are, if there are any, and use the same risk balance as we do on traditional techniques. So biotechnology is rapidly evolving, but the way we talk about it has not. And if so many people have had issues with biotechnology for plants, just think about the alleged safety, health, and philosophical issues that will arise when the conversation moves to animals. If we don't do a better job considering the philosophical as well as the physical dimensions and communicate well about them, even the best innovation and technology will fail to achieve all that it promises. We can do better, but we need to think creatively about our messages and how we deliver them. There will always be conspiracy theorists and bitter critics, but there are a lot of people who are just wary about these innovations, and those are the people we have to work hard to earn their trust so that these technologies can work for everybody. Let me talk now about emergency response, the third prong of our method. And I'm going to do it in the context of the largest foreign animal disease outbreak in American history, the 2015 highly pathogenic avian influenza outbreak. It started in the Northwest, but really took hold in the upper Midwest, especially took hold in the top turkey-producing state in this country, Minnesota, and the top egg-producing state in this country, Iowa. I can assure you, as the administrator of APHIS at the time, that dealing with the largest animal emergency ever was a challenge, but I want to add to that dealing with it in your boss's home state made it even worse. And I feel sorry for Secretary Vilsack. My guess is that every egg producer in Iowa was calling him hourly during that outbreak. And of course, we did our best. More than 50 million birds died during that outbreak, either from the disease itself or because we had to depopulate them. Federal taxpayers spent $1 billion. $1 billion to respond. $700 million for operations, $200 million in compensation for birds we had to depopulate. But thanks to Secretary Vilsack's vision, we also spent some of that money on preparedness so that if it happened again, we'd be in a better place. The economic impacts to the industry were profound. So taxpayers lost $1 billion, or spent $1 billion. I shouldn't say lost because I think it saved a lot of money in the long run and saved a lot of production in the long run, but spent $1 billion. But the industry itself absorbed losses, $1.6 billion in losses to the producers, and $3.3 billion to other sectors like feed and trucking businesses. Often when we have an issue with a pest and disease, it's thought of as only a problem for the particular industry, in this case, egg producers or turkey producers. But think of all the ancillary people who are affected by that. So these impacts ripple throughout the country, not just affecting the farmer who was unfortunate enough to be afflicted with the disease. Consumers suffered. The prices of eggs doubled during that time. And maybe for the first time ever, we had to import eggs from Europe just to make normal food production demands here, which of course required APHIS and Food Safety Inspection Service to do some quick regulation moves. Now, migratory birds undoubtedly introduced the disease. They were the source of the earliest cases in this outbreak. This disease literally fell out of the sky. And we can't control nature. We can't control where birds fly. We can't control which backyard they visit or which commercial operation they decide to land near. We can't and certainly shouldn't try to kill a lot of wild birds, even though there were those who wanted to at that time. But what can we do? How can we make our farms and marketing systems less vulnerable? Modern production methods and marketing systems have generated huge supplies at low prices, and that's certainly a net plus for society. But they also make any disease outbreak far more likely to explode. During the 2015 outbreak, we found lots of serious biosecurity lapses at the farms affected. We saw vehicles move freely between farms without necessary cleaning and disinfection. We saw workers fail to properly clean or change their footwear when moving in and out of poultry houses. And we saw producers using lakes or ponds as drinking water for their birds. And these, of course, were the exact same ponds and lakes where the migratory birds had decided to take a break during their flight and undoubtedly left the disease behind. So given the seriousness of that outbreak and its economic impact, we knew we had to do something to address biosecurity. So we worked closely with our state and industry partners to develop biosecurity outreach materials for commercial and backyard poultry producers. There are lots of people with chickens in their backyards now. We are currently dealing with an outbreak of Newcastle disease in Southern California. It hasn't entered any commercial operations, but we found it already in over 150 backyards. I use that term loosely. Sometimes these backyards have lots of birds. Sometimes those birds in Southern California are what they euphemistically call avian athletes. They're fighting birds, so they're already involved in some illegal activity. But we focus so much on commercial agriculture and how we can protect the health there. But the threat may very well come from backyard operations as well. Something else we did, again, at Secretary Vilsack's rightful insistence, we prepared far more specific response plans. One thing we ran into very quickly in Iowa was the issue of what do you do with millions of carcasses? In some cases, you can compost them right on the farm. Lots of people were trying to sell us equipment on how to handle them, burn them, which didn't ever really work. They had too much fluid in them. Didn't really work. So some we had to send to a landfill, but guess what? Landfills didn't want them. We finally were able to convince a few. So a big part of the preparedness plan now is ensuring that farmers know where we will send dead birds once we depopulate the house. Important piece. We publicly released epidemiology reports that analyze virus spread. We don't ever like to blame anybody for anything. And we don't like to have so much available information that people can go protest and picket at an individual ranch or farm, that sort of thing. But we did provide lots of epidemiological analysis here so people could see what had happened and what we need to do differently. We also revised our indemnity policies. It certainly doesn't seem right that the taxpayers should pay indemnity for depopulating birds if the producers weren't taking proper biosecurity practices. So we've actually made that a regulation. We determined that to receive indemnity, a producer has to at least have a biosecurity plan. We haven't gone much further than that, although we hope to one day, but right now they at least have to have a plan before they can get it. Before I talk about a few other things here, I think we need more techniques to deal with modern farming techniques. Some of the things we're talking about doing here in response to high-path avian influenza in the poultry industry might cost producers money, might cost them time, it might make their production less efficient and reduce margins for farmers and maybe raise prices for consumers. For now, we think that might be a reasonable trade-off, but in the long run, since we are devoted to making agriculture profitable, it's important that we look for new techniques so that farmers and ranchers, in this case egg farmers, turkey farmers, can have better biosecurity, but without increasing their costs in such a way that it hurts their margins. So again, we can't control nature, we can't control where birds fly, but we can control our own actions, and we need more innovation around that. On the plant side, something we've been dealing with for the last several years is citrus greening, also known as wanlan-bing. It's interesting, in California, the citrus industry actually test marketed this. And they found that the people would support more money to fight wanlan-bing than they would citrus greening disease. So in California, our friends always insist that we call it wanlan-bing. Interesting sociological case study there. Citrus greening is probably the single most overwhelming threat that any one agriculture industry faces today. It's widespread in Florida. It's been detected in urban areas, not in commercial areas, but in urban areas in Southern California. Also, we found it in Arizona, Florida, Texas, and Louisiana. Let me tell you about Florida. It has been so devastating to Florida that the orange production in Florida last year was the same level as 1963. They went from like 250 million boxes to 50 million boxes. The impact has just been devastating. And in Florida, of course, you see the license plate. It's an orange on it, right? It's more than just the economic impact of Florida. It's almost an identity crisis, what's happening there, and it's been a horrible impact on them. We've tried to work on this with industry partners, state partners. Everyone's throwing everything we know at this. And we created a multi-agency coordination group to work on it, and they've looked at new techniques. And some of them have worked to some degree and some don't. One tool we've tried is thermotherapy, or heat treatment, which has been applied to 3 million citrus greening infected trees. And you can see it's essentially putting like a little tent over the tree, heats it to a certain degree, and that seems to knock the disease down for a while. But you can also see how inefficient it is. It's literally one tree at a time. So it's been applied to 3 million trees. There are 75 million trees. There's probably now 74 or 72 or 71 as I speak, because they lose trees literally every day to this disease. So it's a great technique. It seems to work, but it's just not efficient for us. We've identified antimicrobials that seem to slow the disease. but they can only slow it. They can't cure it or prevent it. And we're, of course, in an era where there's lots of concern about overuse of antimicrobials. I don't want to get into that debate today. Maybe someone else will. But that's probably not going to be the final answer either. We've even tried, with some mixed success, to go back to the old tried and true dogs to see if they can sniff out the disease in its earliest stages. There's been some success with that, but it's certainly not foolproof. Because if we can find the disease on a tree early enough, we can perhaps remove a few trees. But the most important thing we could do now, that innovation could help us with, is how to stop the disease's spread by stopping the vector, the Asian citrus psyllid. The Asian citrus psyllid has no natural predators in the United States. We funded efforts to raise and release about 12 million parasitoids in citrus-producing states to kill Asian citrus psyllid populations. So that's had some success, but we're nowhere near the kind of mass rearing and distribution capability we would need for citrus greening. So there's lots of things that look promising, but here again, biotechnology may be the answer. The only real solution may be a tree that is resistant to the disease. And there is indeed work going on there. It's not completed. So this field is wide open, and it's an entire industry to be saved. I'm not exaggerating that. The entire citrus industry in Florida is at risk and can be saved through innovation. And it's not as if they are not trying themselves. The growers are putting lots of money into it. The state's putting a fair amount of money into it. The federal government is. We just need more help. Before I conclude, I want to talk about a few other gaps that we have that we, again, challenge you, exhort you to think about. One international threat that some of you are probably reading about quite a bit is African swine fever. African swine fever is incredibly contagious, extremely high morbidity and mortality rates. There's no vaccine. And along with foot and mouth disease, it's the most dreaded disease of swine. It's endemic in much of Africa, and in 2007, cases appeared in the country of Georgia. I want to emphasize, not the state of Georgia. I don't need another major disease outbreak in my boss's home state. So the country of Georgia, not the state of Georgia. Also, Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. Eastern Europe, and now, just in the last few weeks, Belgium have reported cases in wild boar. Not in commercial operations, thankfully, but in wild boar. Most recently, China, who is the world's largest pork producer, is witnessing a very significant and spreading outbreak in its commercial farms that it is responding to, and the entire world is watching in grave horror, including United States pork producers. We're unlikely to see African swine fever arrive in the U.S. via pork or pork products. We already prohibit those products from most of the countries affected for other disease reasons. And for those where ASF is only found in wild boar, we still think there is comparatively little risk. Here's another one of those examples where some people think we should ban import of pork from, let's say, Belgium, which has had a case in wild boar. The problem with that is that would invite other countries to say, you have pseudorabies in your feral swine population, so we're going to ban your pork. So that's how we have to always measure this and balance this. So we don't think it's likely to arrive in a pork product, but it could arrive in imported feed or additives from countries affected, such as China. At least for now, it doesn't seem practical to prohibit feed from entering. Our farmers need it. That might lead some to say, and some are saying, that we should test all these shipments, but we don't really have a test that can adequately detect African swine fever in large feed shipments coming into this country. Perhaps another challenge to you. We don't have a vaccine for African swine fever. If it ever arrives here, if the disease ever arrives here, we'll have little choice but to depopulate all the sick and exposed pigs at enormous cost to taxpayers and the industry and consumers, and with all the attending media coverage and social concern that kind of effort would cause. It's one thing to put down 50 million birds contained in houses. No one ever saw that. And they never really saw how we disposed of the carcasses. If you start putting down thousands of pigs or cows, if they ever came to another kind of disease in this country, and had to do what the UK did in early 2000s when they had foot and mouth disease, had large ditches with fires. Can you imagine the impact in this country? And what would the country allow it to continue for long? So we need a vaccine for African swine fever and any other things you can do to help make the pork supply more safe, more secure, and more sustainable. We could use vaccines, obviously, for many diseases. Foot and mouth disease, there is a vaccine, but it is limited to certain strains and serotypes. So we need a flexible platform for rapid vaccine development, a platform that would allow us to insert various serotypes into the vaccine. And at the current time, there's only one international producer of vaccine. So vaccine for foot and mouth would be helpful. We need better diagnostic tools. Some diseases, like BSE, we just can't test until the animal is dead. So we need tests for sampling live animals and their products in a variety of diseases, including a way to test milk for brucellosis. And then there are the diseases that have similar symptoms. So it would be a good idea, very helpful to us, to have a test that can check for multiple diseases at once to determine if what we're seeing is a particular symptom of an endemic disease or a serious foreign animal disease. For example, Seneca virus A, also known as Seneca Valley virus, is circulating now in the upper Midwest. When we find it, we have to stop pig movement until we rule out foot and mouth disease, because Seneca Valley looks like foot and mouth disease. So a better test there would help. On the other side of APHIS, the plant side, I want to make a special plea for innovation in pest detection for tree and wood pest. With animal diseases, we're likely to detect their existence fairly quickly. Animals will appear sick and die, and someone will notice that. But if an emerald ash borer or an Asian longhorn beetle arrives here, it may be years before it reaches a point that it causes any damage at a location when anyone can notice it. Right now, we're hoping that the spotted lanternfly, which arrived in Pennsylvania sometime in the last 5 to 10 years, has not reached the point that emerald ash borer did, where it is so widespread that we really can't control it by any regulatory means. So we're hoping we can eradicate the spotted lanternfly. And we're also looking for help with spotted lanternfly. Not much is known about it, a pest that hasn't existed in this country ever before, not that much research. So we're kind of operating on the fly, no pun intended, with spotted lanternfly. So let me close here by saying that feeding the world, clothing the world, and increasingly fueling the world isn't a small task for agriculture, and it's a significant challenge for us all. We can't control nature. We can't control what pest or disease threats we'll face necessarily. But we can work on innovative solutions that improve our ability to predict and prevent them, as well as our preparedness and ability to respond to them. I've talked about pest and disease challenges. I'm sure others will talk about other challenges today to a safe, secure, sustainable food supply. But whatever the challenges, we have to face and overcome them. Food is fundamental to a functioning society and indeed our very existence. Ensuring that people have food is the noblest of missions, and one we're blessed to have. The mission itself should provide all the inspiration we need, really, to work hard, not only today, but for the 9 billion people we will be trying to feed and clothe and fuel in 2050. So I thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Shea, for those remarks. As you were speaking, we were going around the audience and collecting some of the questions that you have generated. And so I'd like to open it up to the first question. How does the decreasing water supplies in agricultural areas impact projections of disease control in the U.S.?
That is not something I have really focused on. I wonder if Dr. Tomlinson or Dr. Clark have anything they'd like to offer on that. If not, anything that changes the system changes our calculation. And for example, I guess when water supplies are different, that means the production will change, the kind of product grown will change. So we have to look at that at all times, certainly.
Next question. What is your response to criticisms toward the use of GMO technologies of the claims that we shall go back to traditional agriculture?
I tried to address that a little bit, of course, but the fact is traditional agriculture can't feed 9 billion people. But there's certainly a place for traditional agriculture. And all kinds of agriculture, whether it's biotech or conventional or organic, they all have a place. They all have a market. There's a demand for all of them. And I don't think one should be to the exclusion of the other. And I think perhaps that is my response to those who are the larger critics of genetically engineered or biotech food, that we need all parts of agriculture. We need organic. There are people who only want to eat organic, that's fine. And we're consumer-driven society, it's consumer market kind of society, that's fine. But I think it's inappropriate and downright unfair, really, for critics to deny the best in science that can help feed everybody.
Thank you. Is the problem truly food production or food distribution when we talk about feeding the world?
Well, I think it's probably both. And in APHIS, we're more obviously in the production angle of this, but of course it is a food delivery system as well. Now, that's not something I'm any expert in, but clearly the fact that the United States has to look to export so much food shows that there is a demand in other parts of the world where the food needs to get to and maybe doesn't get there properly. But you know, the distribution has a lot of angles to it. You know, there are terrible governments that don't distribute their food. There are corrupt governments that don't properly distribute food. So there are so many things that go into that, it's both. But from my angle, from the APHIS angle, from USDA angle, we need to do our part. We should at least make sure the production is there. There has to be something there to distribute. And so that's what we are focused on.
What is the relationship between NAFTA and APHIS, if any?
Well, it's certainly quite a bit because we deal with Canada and Mexico with so much trade. We share the common borders. There are diseases and pests that exist in Canada and Mexico that don't exist here. And so our cooperation with those countries is crucial. So, you know, it's unfortunate if the more economic-based arguments around NAFTA were to get into the phytosanitary and sanitary realm. But I think we've been able to maintain good relationships with our friends in Mexico and Canada on all of our programs. For example, Mexico was vital in our effort to eradicate screwworm, to eradicate fruit flies. We continue to work with them. And we also know that our sectors are almost inextricably intertwined, particularly on the southern border with cattle. Cattle go back and forth constantly. And so NAFTA is important for us in that we hope it won't affect any changes in NAFTA, won't affect our phytosanitary and sanitary work with our counterparts. Because I think we've been able to establish very solid science relationships with those countries.
Thank you. Does APHIS have an effort to control pig feces runoff in places like North Carolina?
That is not directly in what we do, but of course, to the extent that it involves pig diseases, we would be involved. We are not directly involved in that, but I think it's another challenge for innovation, really, on how that marketing system and production system in North Carolina can present less of a threat. You know, so many of the things we do now, our farmers are so productive and they apply such sophisticated techniques that probably come out of graduates of schools like Colorado State that come up with such sophisticated techniques that we have to find a way to minimize the downsides of those effective techniques.
Malia, I'd like to reach out to you next and see if you have any more questions.
What is the time frame for APHIS announcing a position on biotechnology in animals and gene editing?
And we're working very closely with other partners in the federal government. The Food and Drug Administration has a role, and the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy is coordinating this effort. So I can't predict exactly when there will be a policy, but it needs to be a government-wide policy. It can't just be an APHIS policy because we will all be involved in it.
APHIS doing to help fruit and vegetable growers meet FSMA and third-party food safety audit standards?
I don't think we're really directly involved in that. What we can try to do is help our fruit producers, especially with techniques that reduce their reliance on pesticides, is one thing that we are working on. But we can help document what they're doing. So that is one of the pieces we can do.
One last question for you, Mr. Shea. Is APHIS involved in spotted wing Drosophila management or eradication?
I'm sorry?
Is APHIS involved in spotted wing Drosophila management or eradication?
We've had some work in that. Perhaps whoever asked the question, if they have more detail about that, I'd appreciate that. But I know we've had some work in Drosophila, but it's not been a major thrust for us, I must admit.
Thank you. We appreciate you taking time to answer the audience's questions.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you very much.